Okay, so now our application is coming to live. We already have here some data in the header of the thread section. Let's now implement the main list of the thread section. So this contains a list of thread summaries. Let's implement this part of the application. The first thing that we will do is we are going to go to the thread section HTML component and we are going to add in here the thread list component. So this is a component that we have defined previously, at least the skeleton of the component is here. We are going to implement this component. So this component will have as input property a threads property, and this threads property is going to point to a threads $observable that we're going to define, and we're going to subscribe to it using the async pipe. Actually, if we think about the meaning of what is displayed in the thread list, this is really not a thread itself. This is more of a thread summary. So let's change the name of the variable to reflect the actual content of what we are passing in. Let's now implement the thread summaries observable here in the thread section component. So let's first define the variable. It ends in $, so it's an observable. But what is the type emitted by this observable? What is the type of its emitted values? If we go to our application, we can see that a thread summary has a string, which is a list of participants separated by commas, and it has some text, which is the value of the text of the last message of the thread. So let's implement this. We are going to define a new type that contains these two fields and also the ID of the thread, so that when we click on it, we can identify which thread was clicked. So this notion is different than the notion of thread, meaning this class here defining thread.ts. It's something slightly different. Because it's not exactly the same concept, let's define a custom type for it. The question now is, where should we define this custom type? Because this custom type is specific to the thread section component, let's define it here in this folder. We are going to create a new file and we are going to call it simply thread summary, and we're going to add a postfix to it, .vm, standing for view model. So the custom type is simply the definition of an interface with a couple of properties. So if we go back here to this image, we can see that the first property is the list of participant names. So we are going to add here a property participant names, which is a string. Let's also add here the ID of the thread, because we're going to need it later to specify which thread is selected. And let's also add here the last message text, which is of type string. So if we compare this to the thread model, as you can see, the main model of the notion of thread is different than its projection in the view in the list of threads. These are closely related concepts, but these are two different notions. One is the notion of thread from the point of view of the business model, the domain model of our application, and the other notion is a notion specific to this view here. We want to display the last message and the list of participants. Let's now take this new type that we have defined and let's use it in the thread section component. We are going to use it here to define the thread summaries observable. So thread summaries is an observable of thread summary VM array, actually, because we are expecting to receive a list of thread summaries, not only one thread summary.